Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hello, Rush Nation, and welcome to the 5 Yard Dynasty podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Liam, at the FSA Tweets on Twitter, and today we are going to be covering the final episode of our Sophomore Scrutiny series. We're going to be focusing on the wide receiver sophomores. But Rich, how are you doing, mate? Before we dive right in, how's your week been?
I'm very good. It is somewhat of a weird week. For those non-UK listeners, we've obviously got a 4-day weekend. We've got 2 bank holidays, Thursday, Friday. I'm trying to do 5 days work in 3 days, which is a bit of a challenge. I don't know about yourself. How's your week going?
Yeah, it's going good. I mean, at the moment, for some reason, a lot of our clients haven't taken holiday this week, even though it's half term. You're only spending 3 days for a 5-day week off. But everyone seems to be wanting something right now. So it is what it is, though, isn't it, Rich?
Indeed.
Right, let's get straight into these sophomores, Rich. Now, this was an incredible class. I mean, coming in, we had our eyes on 4 top guys coming into the draft last year. That was Chase, Waddle, Smith, and Bateman. And
5.
Go on then. Who's your 5th?
Elijah Moore.
Pre-draft, I don't think he was clearly in that top 5, was he?
He was 100% was for me. He was my wide receiver 4 pre-draft. I will not. I appreciate I'm completely throwing you off your flow and diving in before you've even got a chance to speak. But yeah, Elijah Moore was pre-draft. I think wide receiver 4, and Rondell Moore was my pre-draft wide receiver 5. So yeah, I won't listen to that slander.
Completely thrown me off. That's setting the tone for this entire show, isn't it, Rich? So we'll go with top 6 then, Rich, because
that makes me happy.
Just you. But yeah, so a lot of these guys going in the first round of your Superflex drafts, but there was a lot of disappointment with this class. I think the expectations were a little bit too high. We only had 3 wide receiver 3s in this class. We had 1 wide receiver 1, top 12 wide receiver, 120 top 24, and 1 top 36. Now, if you had spoken to anyone pre-draft, you would have probably said, or you would probably heard a lot more of these guys' names in the top 36, Rich, with the way that they were being talked about pre-draft. But let's start with the one guy that both of us coming in really liked. I think that we were a bit worried about the expectations, or at least I was. I'm not going to put words into your mouth because I know that you'll just jump into my flow again. But worried about the expectations of where he was being set up, and that guy is Jamar Chase. He went to the Bengals with the 5th pick in the first round, and first wide receiver off the board, totally justified. And he was going 104 in your rookie drafts, 103, 104 at the very latest, just because of that quarterback positional value, or maybe the running back positional value. Now, Rich, he ended up as the wide receiver 5 on the year. I don't think this has happened in a rookie year ever. I saw a tweet from Peter Howard at PA Howdy on Twitter, and he put out a positional breakout chart of how many wide receivers break out and when they tend to break out. And for the first year, there were, since I think it was 2013, he was looking at going back that far. There had not been a rookie wide receiver in the top 5. So this was a historic season for him. And yeah, Rich, do you want to just take it away from there? At the moment, he's the wide receiver 1 in DLF ADP for May Superflex drafts.
Yeah, I think, we hyped him up as almost too good to be true in terms of coming out. You know, I think in my rookie model, he was a 99th percentile prospect. I think the only people that were ahead of him was perhaps Larry Fitzgerald as a prospect. The guy was the real deal. We saw in that high-powered LSU offense that he was everything you could ever dream of and more. The one concern about him potentially going into the NFL was that he relied on kind of dominating at the catch point in college, and he bullied a lot of smaller, less talented DBs, shall we say, in college, and that was probably the one concern. But yeah, that just shows, I think last year was completely unwarranted. The guy was an absolute beast. Teaming up with his college quarterback, he was everything you'd ever dream of. And as you said, unprecedented rookie season. We thought we were blessed the year before having Justin Jefferson, and obviously he's come and kind of surpassed that. Right now, he is kind of, I think everybody has him as a top 2 dynasty wide receiver, either whether you have him 1 or 2. But look, it's hard to have him anywhere else. I think for me, the guy's almost untouchable, unmovable, because I think that nobody's willing to pay what you'd need to sell him. I mean, I'd need 3 firsts, maybe plus, more than that.
When you said that, I immediately thought 3 firsts, then thought, is that actually a little bit low for a guy at wide receiver 1 that he's 22 years old, 23 years old? So he's got his entire career ahead of him. He's with his college quarterback. I cannot see a way that value is going to dip in a significant fashion. Even with an injury next year, I don't foresee his value dropping to the point where he's not wanted for a first, for example. Yeah,
I think, look, the value is unreal, but to me, this poses a question, and I'm always someone that as soon as somebody reaches that obscene value where it's like, oh, you can't buy Jamar Chase, well, that to me then immediately screams, okay, well maybe I should inquire about selling Jamar Chase, because if you're saying that he's basically untouchable from a buy standpoint, we had this same conversation 2 weeks ago with Kyle Pitts. I don't want to sell Jamar Chase, but if you're telling me I could, get, I don't know, what are we talking in terms of players? If I'm moving from a Jamar Chase to CeeDee Lamb or AJ Brown, what am I getting on top? Am I getting a first on top of that?
I'd say so. I can't see a world where the Chase owner is moving Chase for a second plus one of those guys. I think it's got to be a first.
So if I can get CeeDee Lamb plus one of these young receivers, Chris Olave, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, do you reckon that's real? If I'm doing that, I've got to. I think I need to at least be inquiring if I've got Chase, because I think the price is so obscene, because he is, he's one of the best NFL receivers as a rookie. The price is absolutely astronomical and worthy of being so. And I'm not sitting here saying you must go and sell Jamar Chase. You're absolutely mental if you're going and selling him for anything less than a massive overpay. But I just think that, it's something that I've talked about for the last 2-3 years, is that when a player gets so priced so much that they're almost unobtainable, I think you're doing a disservice if you're not at least inquiring what you could get for him. And I think, as I said, if I can get a CeeDee Lamb plus, if I can get an AJ Brown plus one of these, young wide receivers, maybe I can get a quarterback thrown in, maybe I can get a 23 first or something like that. Like, if I can get that sort of package, then I think you need to at least be inquiring. Because as much as I think Jamar Chase is an absolute star, I'm always looking to sell at peak value. And I just think that it's, he's the wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. There's nowhere for his value to go but down.
I'm with you. I mean, we've spoken about it with a bunch of players over the past year. Jonathan Taylor is the one that springs to mind. And even though, yes, we were slightly wrong on that one, we didn't think that his value would increase from, I think it was RB4 last season, preseason. it did end up going up, but we've always spoken about selling at peak value, and you cannot get any higher than Chase is currently going unless you expect him to start overtaking that top quarterback tier, because at the moment in Superflex ADP, he's the 9th player off the board, 8th or 9th player off the board, and those that are going ahead of him are quarterbacks. There is literally not another position, and that's because that top tier is just so valuable.
Yeah, and
I think there isn't a way that he's going to get above those tiers.
No, and I get it. And, the only players, so he's my 10th overall player. I've got 8 quarterbacks ahead of him, and I've got Justin Jefferson ahead of him. And he's basically neck and neck with Justin Jefferson, Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson. They're all in a tier. So, you could easily say that he's the 6th most priced asset in Dynasty. And I think, maybe that's the move. Maybe you can sell Jamar Chase for an elite quarterback. Could you, with the people down on Lamar and Kyler, could you sell Jamar Chase for one of those straight up? That maybe that's the move. Maybe you could get a little something on top. I just think that, if you've got Chase, don't go and sell him. Don't do something silly like put him on the trade block, but just go and have a little chat. Someone that's got a young rebuilding roster that's got a load of assets, maybe they want to pay up and go and get Jamar Chase.
Yeah, just to amend my my statement, just Jonathan Taylor is going ahead of him, so he isn't the highest non-quarterback player. But as you said, I think that there isn't a way that you can sell him for less than a massive overpay, as you've said. So moving on, Rich, the second wide receiver off the board was Jalen Waddle, the very next pick in the 2021 draft. He went to the Dolphins, and this season is extremely, or this offseason has been extremely interesting for Waddle. He finished as a wide receiver 13 last season, and we've seen Tyreek Hill be traded over to the Dolphins. We've seen a new head coaching staff come in. So, Rich, for Waddle, considering he was a lot of people's wide receiver 5 in the class, maybe even lower than that, where do you see Waddle at the moment? Because he's currently going DLF ADP for May at least as wide receiver 11. Now, I struggle with him because I see the potential, but I also have just seen Tyreek Hill be traded there. So, first of all, where do you see Waddle?
I think, first of all,
secondly, massively hinders him or not.
Yeah, I think first of all, we need to probably, give credit. I was very low on Jalen Waddle. I think I was probably a little bit overly negative of him. I think from a statistical standpoint, he didn't stack up because he basically didn't put together a full season in college, and that affected me and how I ranked him. He was going as the wide receiver 3 in ADP last year in terms of rookie drafts. So, but I just think that I didn't expect him to be force fed the ball as much as he did, and maybe that was a lesson learned for me. A team that drafts a player number 6 overall is going to, force feed him perhaps more than I thought. I was really impressed with him last year. I think he won in areas of the field that I didn't expect in that short to intermediate route. I thought he'd be used more downfield, and I think that Tyreek Hill coming in, a lot of people going, well, this is bad news for Jalen Waddle. I think that they actually complement each other very well, because I think it will allow one of them to be used as a deep threat, one of them to free up space underneath. And if Tyreek Hill is going to come back to be Tyreek Hill of 2-3 years ago, where he was that elite deep threat, then it'll be very interesting to see what space is left underneath for Jalen Waddle. So yeah, I think he's elite. I think he's fantastic. It's very interesting you saying wide receiver 11 in ADP, because I think he got up to like 5 or 6 at one point. I think obviously the Tyreek Hill trade has dropped that a little bit. He's my wide receiver 9. I think I hold my hands up. I was very wrong on him last year, and I'm very happy. I think he's going to be good, and I've got very few concerns about him moving forward over the next few years.
Yeah, so I also had him as my wide receiver 5 going into the NFL draft last year.
You spent too much time listening to me, I think, Liam, last year.
Probably. This was before I was on the podcast, so I was still a listener rather than a content creator at that point. But yeah, I had Waddle at 5. I had Rondell Moore above him. So my rankings last year definitely had something to be looked at afterwards. But I mean, going forward for the future, I think that he's got an absolutely great future. I think this is an unpopular opinion, Rich, but I think the Tyreek Hill trade helps him more than hinders him. And I'm not just talking about coverage and all of that. I'm talking about giving that offense an extra weapon, because last year they didn't have a run game really. They had Myles Gaskin, who is now basically an afterthought in that backfield. They had Mike Gesicki, that was good, but when there's only Waddle, him, and Devonta Parker was out for a good portion of the last season, I believe, and it gives them an extra something to do, or an extra weapon in that offense, especially an elite style wide receiver in Tyreek Hill. So I think it's going to stop the force feed, so you may not see as many targets in the same way. I think it also opens up a lot more of the field to Waddle, and basically takes that passing game to the next level. My only concern with him is Tua going to be able to support all of those weapons, or is Tua going to have a meltdown? Because I think that's where Tua's ADP is coming from at the moment. I believe we're seeing it around QB 16. I think you've seen that upside with those 2 elite top weapons, but then if he doesn't support that, you can also see a new quarterback coming in very quickly, because that's a new coaching staff.
Yeah, and I think they've set the franchise up very well in terms of they've got that extra first round pick next year, haven't they? So I do think that they get kind of giving Tua of the tools. But if he doesn't deliver, they've still got the tools to go and get one of these potentially franchise-altering quarterbacks next year in what's a loaded quarterback draft. So I think this offense, whatever can be said about this offense, it is going to be lightning fast. You've got Chase Edmonds, who's a 4.5 guy. You've got Raheem Mostert, I think, run 4.3. You've got Tyreek Hill, who's probably the fastest player in the NFL. Jalen Waddle ran a 4.3. Mike Gesicki ran a 4.5 as a tight end / not really a tight end, plays receiver. So look, this is going to be an electric offense, and I think, to me, if there's a big drop in the Jalen Waddle price after the Tyreek Hill trade, then I'm probably sniffing around. As I said, he's my wide receiver 9, and I feel very confident about him moving forward. The next guy, obviously Heisman Trophy winner out of Alabama, was Devonta Smith. Went with the 10th pick in the NFL draft. Liam had a solid year. I think he showed some flashes. He had some disappointments, I think, largely led by the quarterback play. But do you think Devonta Smith is gonna, he's currently wide receiver 27 in value. Obviously, we've seen AJ Brown join that offense. Do you think he's gonna settle in as a potentially top 24 wide receiver moving forward, or do you think that ceiling is now beyond him with AJ Brown being in the offense?
I see this as a very similar situation to Jalen Waddle. The difference is the price, and 2, the finishes from last year. As you said, he finished as the wide receiver 30 last year, whereas Waddle the wide receiver 13. So quite a large gap between the two, and we saw that. The biggest difference for me between these two situations, apart from the finish from last season, is that this offense I can feel being a lot more run heavy. They showed last year it was going to be run heavy, but this year I can kind of see that being true again. Maybe not to the full extent, but I don't foresee it being a hugely pass-driven offense, whereas I can see the Miami Dolphins offense being that pass-driven offense. Now, as I said, these situations are very similar. I know that I said this when the trade happened. I see this as a plus for Devonta Smith, that AJ Brown's now there. But the big thing for me is the uncertainty at quarterback. I mean, Tua, the difference with Tua and Hurts is Tua went as the is it the second pick? Why am I blanking on this?
Fifth overall?
Fifth pick, maybe. He was the second quarterback, I remember.
Yeah, Herbert went 6th, Tua went 5th, I think.
Okay, I have no idea why I blanked on that, but Tua went in the first round, one of the top quarterbacks in the 2020 draft. Now Hurts went in the second round, and that's where it kind of scares me a bit, because if you've spent the draft capital of a top first round pick, you aren't going to want to move on from a guy. Now, kudos if they do and it's not their guy and whatnot, but I think the Eagles have a lot more of a clearer path to moving on from Hurts if he isn't deemed the guy in there. He showed flashes last year, Hurts did, but I can see a similar situation as what we've just talked about with Tua. The Eagles have an extra first round pick next year, or 2. I want to check that, but they've definitely got an extra 1. They're just in the extra 1. So I can see something similar with the Eagles trading up if they don't get a top pick to go and get these franchise-altering quarterbacks. Rich, what are your opinions on Devonta Smith? Do you think that the AJ Brown trade helps him?
I'll be honest, I absolutely love Devonta Smith. I think that he is an incredible route runner, something that I use quite a lot, and I'll be talking about a bit later. Obviously, reception perception is, well known as a fantastic tool. I have a little thing that I do where I take kind of averages and I create like a 1-score reception perception. Devonta Smith came out as 78.1% win rate on that, which is like top 10 in the league. I think the guy fits naturally more as that prototypical Z receiver. If AJ Brown's going to come in and be your X, I think this is going to be a really good offense. And I think I've got to be careful how I word this. I think the hate on Jalen Hurts has gone too far. Okay. I agree with everything you're saying around him as a dynasty asset. I'm probably a little bit lower on Jalen Hurts as a dynasty asset because I am concerned that the Eagles won't commit to him beyond this year. So that's why he's my QB 13 and I'm lower than consensus. But
I've got him the exact same as you. I feel like I'm just copying your rankings.
But I was playing around with my redraft rankings and I've gone and watched a lot of Jalen Hurts film. And Jalen Hurts is my QB 6 in redraft at the moment. Okay. I truly think that the hate on Jalen Hurts has gone too far purely because of one bad playoff game. Okay. He looked abysmal in the playoff game against the Bucs. Okay. That Bucs defense was good. Let's not pretend. He had an awful game. However, I've gone back and watched, I'm going to be really sad here. I've watched every throw of Jalen Hurts from 2021 in the NFL. And I came away more impressed than I remember. I think that Jalen Hurts has got a better passing ceiling than people give him credit for. I think people look at him and go, he's a worse Lamar Jackson. I think he's got the passing ceiling that Lamar Jackson has got. Now, people will go, well, Lamar Jackson has not produced 2 wide receivers, but Lamar Jackson has 100% produced 2 wide receivers because Mark Andrews was the Titan 1 last year and Marquise Brown had 140 odd targets and I don't know where he finished, but I think he was a top 24, maybe even top 15 receiver last year. Like, I believe that Jalen Hurts can produce fantasy production out of Devonta Smith, out of AJ Brown, out of Dallas Goedert. And I think that the hate on Jalen Hurts has led to this price drop on Devonta Smith. So, yeah, I've actively bought a couple of shares of Devonta Smith recently. As I said, he's my wide receiver 20. I think the guy's a stud. I have no doubts about him being a competent elite fantasy option moving forward. So if I can get a guy that's in his second year in the league, has already produced wide receiver 30 last year, I see no reasons why at wide receiver 27 prices he can't easily outproduce that.
I'm with you. I mean, on Hurts, I think the things that people tend to see, it's obviously driven by a recency bias, but people forget that he's thrown 4 300 yard or plus games in his, 15, basically 20 starts. That's incredible for someone that we're talking about as may not have a job next year or after this season. I mean, when his throwing game is bad, it is bad. He's had 100 yards, 115. They're some of the lowest throwing yards that he had last year. But even in those games, he's scored over 10 points for you. If another quarterback throws that many yards, they aren't scoring 10 points for you. It's as simple as that. And I think, as you said, people don't give Hurts the credit that he probably deserves, and for the upside, I just think a lot of people are scared about that downside. Back onto Devonta Smith, though, because this isn't about quarterbacks. I mean, I think people are really scared by this situation, and understandably so, but I think it's gone a little bit too far. And I've got him as my wide receiver 18, and I am 9 spots ahead of ADP. I think that to me is crazy, but is it crazy to the general public that I'm 9 spots ahead on Devonta Smith? Like, really?
But we talk with rookies. This is what frustrates me a bit about the Dynasty community. Okay, we talk for the last 2 years. Everybody says talent over situation. You know, a lot of people got burned by the Clyde Edwards-Helaire situation. A lot of people had them as their running back one and bought into that hype. And since then, everybody's gone, you know, AJ Brown, we docked because of his landing spot. Let's go talent over situation. And then everybody gets to a veteran player and they're like, no, Devonta Smith's talented, but his situation's not good. And it's like, okay, but what happens if, you know, who knows where the NFL will be in a year? What happens if the Packers completely implode? Aaron Rodgers says, I want to be traded. And the Eagles turn around.
These words out of your mouth.
And the Eagles turn around and like, there's 2 first-round picks for Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers is suddenly the quarterback in Philadelphia, is suddenly everyone going to be jumping all over Devonta Smith?
Stop it. I do not want to be having these conversations with my dad, who's an Eagles fan.
Aaron Rodgers was the first player that came to my head. I'm sure there's other quarterbacks that I could think of. Off the top of my head, he was the guy I could think of. All right. So I apologize, but who knows? Lamar Jackson's a free agent. What happens if the Ravens turn around and like, yeah, we're gone. Trade Lamar Jackson there. Who knows? These sort of things could happen. What happens if the Raiders want to trade Derek Carr? Like, it's not that difficult.
Paid him though,
but they could still potentially trade him. They've not paid him to a point at which he's not going anywhere, have they?
No, but I suppose. I mean,
the way they've structured that contract, there's still an out after this year. They've basically given him extra years, but not guaranteed him any more money. It's genuinely the weirdest contract extension I've ever seen from Derek Carr. Anyway, we're getting way off the weeds in terms of Devonta Smith. All I'm saying is I think that the hate has gone too far. I think that the guy's a natural route running maestro. I think he's a fantastic talent. I think at the moment he's being underpriced because of his situation. And to me, that screams an immediate buying opportunity.
So, Rich, let's move on to the next wide receiver on our list. And he was taken with the 15th pick in the NFL draft. He was the most weirdest pick that we saw. Or it was the 20th pick, sorry. But, or am I getting these mixed up, Rich? Yeah, I'm getting them mixed up. 20th pick. So,
15th pick.
Okay, it doesn't really matter. He went in the first round.
Liam can't read.
No, I'm pretty sure I'm mixing that up. But anyway, he went in the first round. And the Giants traded up. It was weird. I don't get it. Rich, he was not slated as a first-round pick throughout the entire pre-draft process. And then the Giants went and got Tony. Now, there's a load of question marks. Go on.
Can I just say
again? Yeah,
so it was the Giants traded down to 20, got the extra
I'm just
pick.
Stop with this now.
Got the extra because that was the Justin Fields trade, wasn't it? So the Browns,
with
the Bears traded up with the Giants, got Justin Fields. That was the first time ever in his career Dave Gettleman had traded back, got the extra first-round pick that was the top, was it 6 or 7 this year? And obviously then got drafted Cadarius Tony, which at the time felt a massive reach.
Yeah. And you could probably still say that because he didn't really show anything. I mean, he had one amazing game where he had 189 yards. He had 13 targets on 10 receptions, and he went absolutely crazy. He was the wide receiver 5 in fantasy that week, and then he was basically unheard of for the rest of the season. A lot of that was down to injury, but after that game, everyone was quite hyped on him, and now he's kind of fizzled out. There's a lot of question marks around his personality and his work ethic. There were rumors that they were going to trade him before the draft or before the 2022 draft. Now, Tony, he's shown something, but they've just drafted Rondell Robinson, as you've said, this year. That kind of feels like a similar pick to him. So how do you feel about Cadarius Tony? Because I sold him for a second in a league that I'm in, but I feel like that was kind of a push to try and get a second. At the moment, I don't feel like you can get that value everywhere.
Yeah, I don't like Tony. I didn't like him coming out. He was a 1-year wonder late breakout in college at Florida, which is never exactly a good thing to be. I didn't like him as a prospect. I didn't get why the Giants picked him at 20. I think they could have probably moved back and got him at the early seconds. Certainly wouldn't have taken him over plenty of the other receivers on the board. You said there that he basically didn't produce. He had, as you said, 1 week where he finishes wide receiver 5. He had 2 weeks where he finished as the wide receiver 30 and 33. And then outside of that, he didn't have a week where he finished inside the top 60. In those games where he produced, he had a 22.5% target share and finished as the wide receiver 30. He had a 33.3% target share and finished as the wide receiver 5. He had a 30.8% target share and finished as the wide receiver 33. The reason he was getting force-fed the ball wasn't because he was getting open. It was because there was nobody else on that offense. I hinted at the reception perception number. Cadarius Tony's the 4th worst in terms of his route win rate at 60.7%. It was poor. I don't think that he has a home in New York. I think we've seen that with the rumors. I think that whenever a new regime comes in and rumors like that start, it's one of two things. It's either trying to motivate a guy or saying we don't particularly want him. And I don't think they want him. I think that, as I've said before, to me, New York is similar to Chicago. I think they're viewing this as a let's clear everything out this year, try and build a culture, and our rebuild starts next year. I think that you'll see a lot of churn next off season within New York, and I think that this is almost a period of a grace period for the new regime. I think you'll see that offense change. I think you'll see Sterling Shepard, Kenny Golladay, potentially Kadarius Tony, Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley all moved out the door, and I think the rebuild starts again in 2023. And look, I don't like drafting or trading for wide receivers in that wide receiver 40 to like 60 range, because I think you have to pay quite a lot, but you don't get the return, and there's a lot of risk there. And that's exactly where kind of Kadarius Tony is. He's wide receiver 55 for me. Interestingly, I've got him literally back to back with Rondell Robinson. I would currently take Rondell Robinson over Cadarius Tony, and I just think that I don't like Tony, and I think that it might be an opportunity of just selling for what you can get right now, because I do think, as you said, you can probably get a future second, maybe a little bit more.
The reason I laughed was because I just looked at my rankings as you said that, and I actually have Rondell Robinson the spot behind Tony as well. I feel like I may have copied the wrong column from our consensus rankings, Rich, but I know I haven't, but let's see. So
next guy. Sorry, go on. You wanted to talk about Tony?
I mean, I was just going to say, I don't think you're going to get more than a second for him. I struggle to get a second out of anyone for the 2023 class.
Okay, yeah. So the next guy to talk about was drafted by the Ravens, came in much ballyhooed as a potential superstar. He was someone that I was in love with in the pre-draft process, and then sort of plummeted in a lot of people's estimations because of that bad landing spot with the perceived run-first offense led by Lamar. Had an okay rookie season. I think obviously injury affected, didn't start for quite a few games at the beginning of the season, but certainly showed flashes. Obviously Hollywood has now gone out. Rashad Bateman, Liam, are you a fan? Are you a believer, or do you think that the hype is outweighing his current production?
Yeah, I'm a believer. So I had him wide receiver 4 pre-draft, and that didn't change once the landing spot and the draft capital came in. I think with Bateman, I got a couple of shares because of that perceived bad landing spot. Okay, I have no idea what happened to my camera then. We'll move on. So he didn't play for the first 5 weeks because of an injury. Now, that to me says that people are probably seeing his full season as, or this season as a full season, which isn't quite right. And people need to remember that. But yeah, I think going into this year, especially, it's going to be an interesting situation for him because Hollywood Brown has been traded away, as you hinted to. That offense is going to run through Mark Andrews in the passing game. But I think a lot of people are expecting him to be the next breakout candidate for this class because there's not really another option at the wide receiver position. And I also think that, but I don't believe it just because of this trade. I truly believed it last season, and it was a shame that not much came about. I mean, even in his stretch of games where he did play, Lamar Jackson didn't play all of them. Lamar Jackson was also injured last season towards the end of it. So, I mean, it's a tough one because we're talking about injuries and we always say you can't predict injuries, but someone is going to get injured in the NFL. It just happens all the time. And it may come to the point where we've seen a lot of careers just completely not take off because of injuries. I mean, take Will Fuller, for example. If he was healthy, he would be a great player, but he just has never been healthy for a full season. I'm not saying that's what Rashad Bateman's going to be. We've only seen him for 1 year, so let's not take it like that. But to me, if everyone is healthy, especially in that offense, Rashad Bateman has the best chance in this class to break out of anyone.
I love Rashad Bateman. I think, for me at the moment, Devonta Smith, Rashad Bateman, and the next guy we're going to talk about are all being valued in a similar tier range. And to me, I'm higher than consensus on all three. And I think that all three are screaming buys. I think that Rashad Bateman flashed enough for me, both statistically and on film, to warrant me to think that he can be that prototypical X, the number 2 receiver in this offense behind Mark Andrews. I really think that he's a great buy, and I think that he will easily be a top 24 wide receiver within the next 6 to 9 months. I think the guy is very talented, and I have no concerns about him being part of that offense. As I said, Hollywood Brown was a top 10 targeted wide receiver last year. I think he had 146 targets off the top of my head.
Roughly that. It was definitely over 140.
If you're telling me that Rashad Bateman can get 120, 130 targets next year, I'm buying that all day. I'm very excited about him. This is a guy that is a big, prototypical receiver that runs really good routes and can get open. And I think that for me, I'm all in. I'd happily pay probably a 23 first, maybe I'd want a little bit back if I'm paying a 23 first, but I'd easily take him 105 in this year's draft class. I think I'd take maybe 106. I'd take Pickett, obviously Breece Hall, Kenneth Williams, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, and then I'd probably need to have a conversation about Chris Olave. So maybe I'd take him 106, 107. But look, I think that Bateman at the moment is being valued at far less than that.
So where do you have him in your ranks at the moment, Rich? So ADP has him at wide receiver 25.
So he's wide receiver 23 for me.
Okay. We really need to stop agreeing because I've just had a look at my rankings.
You need to stop copying my rankings.
I shuffled a few things around because I was looking. I'm like, that's a little bit low. I had him behind Olave, McLaurin, etc., and I bumped him up to 23 just before you had that. Well, we'd had this conversation. So
look, I know. I hate on Terry McLaurin all the time, but if you're telling me I could get if I could trade Terry McLaurin for Rashad Bateman plus. I mean, I'd prefer Rashad Bateman straight up over Terry McLaurin, so that's an easy move.
You can, because at the moment, Terry McLaurin's going 9 spots ahead of Bateman in ADP. So
that's what, probably. Do you reckon I can get a second on top of Bateman for McLaurin?
I'd say so.
Oh, then I'd urge people to go and do that. That's outrageous. There's no way that Terry McLaurin should be going ahead of Rashad Bateman.
Right, Rich, let's move on because we've spent 45 minutes just on the first 5 guys. This one I'm going to let you have because he's your guy. Elijah Moore went to the Jets in the second round. He was first wide receiver outside the first round to go. At the moment, his ADP is wide receiver 28. His finish, wide receiver 50. However, I'm going to hand it over to you because you're going to come at me with that one brilliant Elijah Moore statistic that I know you love using.
Yeah, he was, what was it, week 7 to 13, he was wide receiver 3 or something like that. Basically, for a stretch, he was awesome. And I think that Elijah Moore is awesome. You know, it feels slightly ridiculous that this has been 2 years on the trot where my pre-draft crushes of Elijah Moore last year, Tutu Atwell, who perhaps we'll talk about later, but then Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson this year have all 3 of the 4 have ended up on the Jets. So maybe next year, whichever 2 players I fall in love with might end up on the Jets. Look, I think Elijah Moore, as I said, I'm throwing him in the same bucket as Devonta Smith and Rashad Bateman. I think he is so poised for a year 2 breakout. I think he is incredible. I've got no concerns about him playing alongside Garrett Wilson. You know, I'm more buoyant than most people are on Zach Wilson, but I think Elijah Moore showed last year. You know, Zach Wilson had probably one of the worst rookie seasons ever, and Elijah Moore was still able to produce with catching passes from Zach Wilson, Mike White, Joe Flacco at one point. Like, you know, the guys are stud, and I think that wide receiver 28 price, this is an absolute bargain. This is a guy that for me could be a fringe wide receiver 1 in dynasty value as early as kind of next January.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, a lot of people are worried about that Garrett Wilson draft pick from this year, and understandably so. We both had Wilson as our wide receiver 1 in this class, but I don't think it hinders. I'm saying this about this entire class at the moment, but I don't think adding this extra wide receiver hinders more as much as people think. The big thing is whether Zach Wilson is going to step up. I know that you are a fan of Wilson, not just through your team fandom, but you believe that he will step up, and I think that he's got one of the best chances to do so. But we need to see it for Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson to be fantasy relevant. But I think the sky's the limit with Elijah Moore. I definitely think that he can be a top 10 wide receiver at the position this time next year if he has a really good year.
Yeah, I said fringe top 12. You're saying top 10. I'm happy with that. The next guy we're going to talk about a little more. So Rondell Moore. Look, this is a guy I loved in the pre-draft process. If you talk about age-adjusted production, he doesn't really get much better than Rondell Moore's freshman year out of Purdue. For me, my biggest concern is that I want to see Rondell Moore used as a wide receiver rather than just a gadget player. I think he can be a good wide receiver and be fed the ball. And my concern is that in Arizona, he's just going to get used as essentially as Isaiah McKenzie gets used in Buffalo and never actually be used as a proper wide receiver. So I'm higher than consensus on Rondell Moore. I think he's like my wide receiver 53 and his current ADP 68. I mean, Liam, are you a believer in Moore? Do you need to see more before you buy in?
How many puns do you want to throw into this?
When you've got more, you've got to throw him in. I feel like
I thought that would have been a bit too cheesy, but you managed to throw in a bunch there. For Rondell Moore, I've got him as my wide receiver 48, so I do think that he's going to produce. I think a lot of his production came from being the gadget guy. I mean, he had that one insane game where he had 8 targets, 7 receptions, 114 yards and a touchdown. But outside of that, he didn't have a lot of targets. He had a game with 5, 6, 5, and 11, which is the highest he had for the rest of the season. As you said, my biggest concern is the gadget temptation to use him has. But I think last year you had Christian Kirk there in the slot, and I think that Moore could come in should, in my opinion, could come in and become that slot guy and therefore be used a lot more. I still think that he'll be used as more of a gadget guy as well. So I don't think he'll get a full workload, but that slot position, I think it's his to lose at this point. Now, I don't know how much production that's going to produce because historically we haven't seen a lot from the Arizona Cardinals slot position in terms of fantasy production. You've also got DeAndre Hopkins, who has been suspended for the first portion of the season, and they've just traded for Hollywood Brown. So how many targets he gets in that offense is unknown. I mean, Zach Ertz is back as well. So there's a lot of targets to go, or there's a lot of weapons that need those targets. So I think that it's going to be the 4th option on that team at best, and that's what scares me.
Yeah, I think, look, for Rondell Moore to have fantasy relevancy, he needs to actually be used as a wide receiver and not a running back. His ADOT last year was 1.2 yards. No other receiver was below 5. Like, it's just mind-blowing how they used him. And I think that unless he's actually going to see some targets more than, a couple of yards in front of the line of scrimmage, he's going to be needing 120, 130, 140 targets to be fantasy relevant. And with Marquise Brown, yes, DeAndre Hopkins is missing 6 games, but he's going to come back at some point. They've got AJ Green still there, Zach Ertz. They've just spent a 2nd-round pick on Trey McBride. Like, the volume's not going to be there for Rondell Moore unless something changes and he starts getting used more downfield as a traditional wide receiver. And if that happens, then I think he could be really useful as that kind of potential flex option. But he needs to actually be used as a wide receiver rather than nothing. Right, should we fly through these next 4? Because I feel like
these 4 should be quick anyway.
Yeah.
So the next one is Dwayne Estridge, went to the Seattle Seahawks. He's going undrafted in Superflex at the moment.
Let's keep it quick. Terrible player last year. Didn't like him coming out. Don't like him anymore. He's ranked outside my top 100. Let's move on.
Okay. We'll move on to a guy that Rich liked a little bit more last year, Tutu Atwell. This was the guy that Rich was pumping up on Twitter. Tutu had no games last year. He tore his ACL before the year, I believe it was. So, Rich, I'll let you dive in a little bit because I know this was your guy last year.
I still believe the guy produced in college There is a clear hole for him as the deep threat in this offense. Do I think he's going to be fantasy relevant week in, week out? No. Do I think if you're in some sort of dynasty best ball league, he could potentially be worth a late round flyer? Maybe. You know, you've got to remember they spent a second round pick. That was the first pick they had last year. There's a reason that they wanted him. I think they want him in that kind of Deshaun Jackson role that they had at the start of the year. And I really hope that he gets an opportunity to settle into that kind of wide receiver 3 role in this offense. And look, I'm not going out and acquiring him. I've already got far too many shares, to be honest. But yeah, maybe I'm like a scorned lover and I can't quite let go. But I do believe that Tutu Atwell will have some competent games this week. I don't know if I can ever see a world where he's fantasy relevant, just because I think the type of player he is and the type of role that he's going to have in that offense, I think he's going to be too boom bust to be a reliable option. But I think that he will flash at least this year if he stays healthy.
Yeah, so moving on to the next player, we've got Teres Marshall now. He was a guy that a lot of people were high on coming into the draft. Rich shaking his head, so that's a no from Rich. But he was going mid-second in Superflex drafts. And I think with Marshall, a lot of people expected him to come in and just be great. And that's where a lot of the expectations or a lot of the value has disappeared from. But he also didn't show anything last year. I mean, that offense was awful. They lost their best weapon in Christian McCaffrey for a good portion of the season. So do you see any change this year, Rich, or do you fully just believe Teres Marshall is not worth anything at the moment?
No, I don't like him. I didn't like him last year. I thought he was overhyped because I think people were looking for big outside receivers and people forgetting that he's actually not very good. Coming back to the reception perception number. So we talked about, Jamar Chase, 78.5, Devonta Smith, 78.1, Rashad Bateman, 77.4, Elijah Moore, 76.6, Teres Marshall, 45.1. He was the only NFL wide receiver that had a below 50% win rate last year. It's, there is a reason why he didn't produce, and there was a reason why he didn't get on the field as much as some people would have hoped. It's because he was pretty terrible. Yes, he's a bigger bodied outside receiver, but if you can't get open, you can't get open. So yeah, I'm not buying any Teres Marshall shares. I don't have. I think. Oh no, I've got one on a taxi squad somewhere. I'll take that back. But yeah, I certainly not someone that I'm hoping for like a year to break out, because I just don't see it, quite frankly.
I think there's too many questions with that offense in general. But the next player on our list, Rich, and the last one, so they were the first 2 rounds of the draft. We're going to skip to the only other guy that was fantasy relevant outside of those 2 rounds. That was Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, Rich, I wasn't a huge fan of him after the draft. I liked him pre-draft, but was that more the name? I don't know. He's got a cool name. I mean, he went in the 4th round. Rich, you're not a fan of day 3 wide receivers, as you made very clear last year and probably have made less clear this year, but still got it in somewhere. And he kind of shocked everyone. So he finished as the wide receiver 21. There was a period where he was the wide receiver 1. I think it was over a 3-week period. He went extremely crazy towards the end of the season. The Lions wanted the ball in his hands. There were a couple of plays where he had it snapped directly to him, or the end arounds, etc., where he got the ball in his hands. Now, at the moment, his ADP is wide receiver 35. Rich, what do you think of Amon-Ra? I've got him as wide receiver 39, and I've got him in a tier where I'm kind of confused about what to do. I'm probably not taking any of the guys in that tier just because I prefer the running back value.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I'm someone that preaches targets and target share, and I think that targets are earned to a certain extent. And I think that this is where I kind of lean, and I've banged on about reception perception because it's something that really helps me separate what I deem as earned targets and kind of given targets. And I think that you can be force-fed targets when there's not much else around and there's not many other kind of options. And, the reasons economist St. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, getting confused with his brother, kind of burst onto the scene, up until week 12, he didn't have a game where he'd produced a top 32 week. Like he wasn't really producing fantasy. From week 13 on, he had 5 of the 6 weeks as a wide receiver 1. Okay. The least amount of targets he saw in those games was 10. He had a 29% target share or higher in every single one of those games. The Lions made a point to force feed him the ball. Okay. I then go back and watch the film and was basically watching to see if was he getting open or was he the first and only read on those plays. And basically he wasn't getting open. He was just being force fed the ball. He only had a 64% win rate in terms of reception perception, which isn't great. It's pretty poor, quite frankly. And I think that the Lions have answered the question around what do they think about St. Brown moving forwards, because I think he is a above average slot receiver that is going to, do something with the ball in his hands, but I don't think you can build an offense around him. And basically they've shown that that's what they believe he is, because they've gone out and they've signed DJ Chark in free agency. They've gone out and they've traded up to get Jameson Williams in the draft. And I think that for me, Amon-Ra St. Brown, you've probably missed your sell window. That was pre-draft when people were talking about him as a top 20 wide receiver. He's been, for me, he's been in the 40, around the 40s all off season. He's currently my wide receiver 44. And I just can't get on board, because I think he is a player that isn't an elite talent. And, like Rondell Moore, needs the volume to produce, and I don't see a role in which he's going to get that volume. So for me, at the price, wide receiver 35, I reckon there's still a Amon-Ra St. Brown believer in your league. Maybe we just need to share some stats around that last 6-week stretch, because it was truly phenomenal. But I'm not a believer. I'd quite happily sell for. I reckon you can probably get more, but I think I'd sell for like a 23 second and the third right now. I reckon you might be able to get a mid first, maybe a late first easily for him at the moment.
Yeah, I'm finally happy that we have a difference in rankings, to be honest, Rich. It proves that my column was not copied from your side and from my side. I wasn't a huge fan. I've argued against him this year. I'm a big Jameson Williams fan, so that's where I think the ball is going to be going. I think there's room for both of them to feed in fantasy. I just don't think that Amon-Ra is going to be the number one that everyone hopes that he is going to be. But yeah, I'm not going to rehash what you've already spoken about, Rich. So have you got any plugs for this evening, or are we good to go straight out?
Nothing from me. We've got an exciting guest lined up. That's obviously concludes our Sophomore Scrutiny series. We've got an exciting guest for next week. That's it from me.
Right, that's it from both of us then. So, as Rich said, tune in next week live at 8:00 on Tuesdays in the UK. But until then, guys, I'll see you next week and have a great week. Bye, guys.